Gentlemen, it's time to talk a little more Seahawks football. The Ground Puck Podcast with Curtis Crabtree, Fox 13, Tim Booth, Seattle Times. It is brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, the finest brewery in all of the land. Makers of Manny's Pale Ale, Bodie Zaffa IPA, Lucille, Rogers Pilsner. They've got a wonderful tap room that is open 7 days a week, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Visit them at georgetownbeer.com. Curtis, good day to you. Tim, good day to you. Boy, that was Tim, that was the weirdest football game I've ever seen in my life yesterday. I was watching the Seattle Seahawks. We're the same age. I had flashes of the 1990s.
Yeah, probably that stretch of, but after the terrible season of 92, so that stretch of like 93 to 96 where they were trying to figure out what they were and who they were, that kind of felt like it was a game out of that era.
Yeah, it was awful. I don't know where you got, Curtis, where you want to start. I feel we do this show every single week and we start with this damn offensive line. I mean, you know, there's going to be a lot of criticism that's going to be thrown Geno's way for his performance of 3 interceptions. There, of course, is going to be second guessing with Ryan Grubb and the offensive play calling. I do want to touch in on the defense because I thought the defense played well yesterday. I mean, certainly gave them plenty of opportunities to win that game. But Curtis, I keep coming down to this with any criticism thrown at Geno or Ryan Grubb is, what are they supposed to do if the guys up front can't block? I mean, I don't know what they can actually get to in their playbook to do anything with that performance that they're getting up front with those 5 guys.
I think it was last week I said 80% of this team's problems is the offensive line. It's higher. It's probably like 90%. I mean, that performance is it's killing them. They are unable to win football games with the play of their offensive line. I mean, you have 6 penalties on the offensive line yesterday, 3 holding penalties. Anthony Bradford called for 2. Mike Jarrell called for 3. Laken Tomlinson got 1. Then you just have the execution areas of it where Geno Smith is getting pressured on damn near over half of his snaps yesterday. You get the 3rd and 4th and 1s in overtime. Can't get it because you can't block anybody, can't move anybody on the line of scrimmage. In the running game. I mean, that's it. That's the problem right there. You know, the rest of the roster, special teams I thought were great yesterday. Defense made it massive strides from what their issues have been over recent weeks. But it's a replacement level offensive line mostly across the board, and it's killing them in their ability to try to win football games right now.
I mean, Tim, they know that. I mean, as a play caller, what is he supposed to do as he is lining up play calls? I mean, we can dissect the 3rd down, 3rd and 1 play, 4th and 1. Should they not got out of something? But at the end of the day, it's almost, Tim, it doesn't matter what he calls because they can't execute it.
It's, you know, if you believe in a higher power, it's like, okay, I'm going to call this play and pray that we actually have enough execution to be able to run it somewhat successfully. I don't know why yesterday kind of stands out above everything else this year, but yesterday really felt like the ultimate example of how much that offensive line is hamstringing everything that they want to try and do offensively. Maybe it was the fact that it seemed like Geno had no time to throw. Maybe it was the fact that it felt like Ken Walker was having to do even more improvising in the backfield just to make some positive yards in the ground game. Maybe it was the fact that Zach Charbonnet had nowhere really to run in the few opportunities that he got yesterday. But it really felt like yesterday was the tipping point. That was like, okay, we knew this was not good. Now here's the starkest example of a game that Seattle absolutely should have figured out a way to win. And because of this collective unit, they're walking out with their 5th loss in the last 6 games. It's back to your original question. I don't know what to do if you're Ryan Grubb other than come up with play designs and blocking schemes that get the ball out of Geno's hand the second he has it from Connor Williams, if he gets it from Connor Williams, and try and create some sort of offense in that way. Because anytime that he was asked to drop back and stand in the pocket and let his receivers, run routes and push the ball downfield. It just wasn't there yesterday. And again, it's been a problem all year, but yesterday was kind of the ultimate example of it sort of really standing out to those of us who were there.
Curtis, I mean, what is going on with Connor Williams and the snaps? And how many of those yesterday do you put on him? There's one at least on Geno, and I kind of side with the third one also being on him as well. But what do you think?
Are you talking about the interceptions?
No, I'm talking about the snaps.
Okay,
he had 3 bad snaps again yesterday, but I thought the
he
last 2. Well, I thought the last. Than that.
Geno was playing patty cake all day, trying to grab balls that were, outside of his catch zone, basically. You ever seen those like reaction time games where you got like the different lights on the wall? It was like he was doing this, trying to hit all the different lights up there, trying to catch the football. Yesterday with the way Connor Williams was throwing it around there, it was a brutal afternoon for the set quarterback operation yesterday. And yeah, Geno got his hands on the first one that went through his hands. Mm-hmm. You would like to see him be able to catch that one. The second one either came early, caught him by surprise, whatever. I don't think he got his hands on that one. And then, yeah, you've got, he's reaching out to his side, one-handing catch it, to bring the ball in on those shotgun snaps throughout that game. It was ugly. It was really not pretty. And, I mean, this is not new. If you'd seen this in the first game against Denver back in week 1, maybe you wouldn't have been shocked given the fact that Connor Williams had only been here about 3 weeks at that point. Certainly wasn't a rainy day yesterday on the field. I mean, some dampness, sure, but like, I don't think you can put that on the operation. That just, you already have the issues with the right side of the offensive line. Now you throw in like the center quarterback exchange being a problem too. Like, what's Geno supposed to do if he can't get the football? And he played into some of the snap issues, but that was an offense, even with all of the dumpster fire in front of him on the offensive line yesterday, still put up 420 plus yards yesterday. Yeah. He threw for what, 360 or so? Man, you need some hazard pay because, what he's going through right now is just non-functional for an offense over the long term.
There's been, Tim, there's a big reputation of Scott Huff when he was coming over from UW to the Seahawks. And I just wonder, I mean, you can be the best coach in the world, right? But if you don't have talent, I mean, and to be fair, he's on his 4th string offensive, his right tackle. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have talent, you can't coach it. I mean, there's only so much coaching you can do. And I just wonder, like, what else he can do or try, or I don't know. I mean, Anthony Bradford, what concerns me, Tim, is if Anthony Bradford is the best you have at right guard, boy, that is just such a damning commentary on Haynes.
Oh, absolutely. It's 100%. And that's, you can justify what you've seen at right tackle because of the injuries.
Yeah.
I mean, you can explain it away and understand, okay, we have a guy who played D2 football that we took in the 7th round, a flyer on. He shouldn't be in that situation, but here we are. This is what we have to live with. The fact you took Christian Haynes that high and he has not won the job from Anthony Bradford is an absolute indictment on not only Christian Haynes for not doing what is being asked of him to take that job, but also the scouting and the decision-making process of John Schneider and his staff to think that this was a guy who was deemed one of the most NFL-ready, pro-ready interior offensive linemen in theory, coming out of Connecticut last year. And for him not to be a plug-and-play capable player at this point when you have massive issues in that spot is a complete failure on multiple levels. It's a failure of the player, it's a failure of the coaching, it's a failure of the scouting that this guy has not been able to find a way to be a contributor for you, and that you are rolling Anthony Bradford out there to be your starting right guard right now, which is essentially the equivalent of a turnstile based around the way that he has played. So I back to Scott Huff. I don't know what you can do. You can only do so much as a coach. There's only so many different blocking schemes. There's only so many different ways you can try and help your offense without suffocating what your offense needs to do. You can't keep 8 guys in the block and send 2 guys out in a route. That doesn't work. So at this point, I other than you make massive changes, you flip Laken Tomlinson to the right side, or you put Jason Peters at 900 years old in there at right guard. Like, short of that, I don't know what they do at this point.
Well, Jim and I have talked about this. I think the one thing too with Bradford is he just looks out of shape. He just does. He does not. I mean, I get offensive linemen are big. He looks just sloppy. I mean, he just I mean, and I think that's part of it too. He's getting beat easily. I mean, that Fisk guy owned him yesterday. I mean, absolutely owned him, and he also owned Connor Williams there as well. What did you guys think? Tim, you go first. What did you guys think of the 4th down decision? You agree with it?
Yeah, I thought it was the right call. I thought it was the right call to go for it. I thought it was a terrible play call. You had just tried to run in between the tackles on 3rd and 1 and not been able to get it. I would have tried to get out on the edge in some way, but I had zero problem with them going there because of exactly what happened. You knew that Matt Stafford had the capability to hit a couple big plays, and all of a sudden they're in range to win the game with a touchdown anyway. So I thought it was the right call to go for it there.
Curtis?
Yeah, 100% go for it. Like, there's zero issue with that for me. It's the fact that you have 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, can't get it. Like, in overtime, touchdown wins it for you. The other team can then win it with a field goal. Like, I think even more so than it would be in regulation, it's skewed in favor of going for it. And yeah, play didn't work. They couldn't block it because they have the offensive line they have. Like, they don't have an ability to open the running lane. They didn't do it basically at all yesterday for Ken Walker at any point in the game. And
that final drive they did, though, that I understand why they felt confident in it, because that final drive was set up really because of him. He was running it down. They were running it down their throats on those first few plays. But
they had a couple runs, but like overall on the day, I mean, would they average Ken averaged 3.3 yards a carry?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like they were carving out the Grand Canyon there for him to run through that for the afternoon.
It's one of these, sports talk things, right? It was supposed to be like on, Jim and I were talking about this. So you have to have one opinion, and that's the only right one. I was real conflicted yesterday. I was like 52% on the side of I would have kicked it. And here's why I would have kicked it. One, I mean, listen, it's a yard. You should get a yard in the NFL. And to your point, Curtis, yeah, I mean, the game, it ends it. Game's over. You don't want to give the ball back to Matt Stafford. Those are all, I mean, I can't argue against those. Why I would have probably kicked it, and then you bring in your own risk that Myers is shaky, and I don't know if there's anyone that's confident in Jason Myers right now. But your defense was playing well. I mean, it really was playing well. For the most, it had given up 13 points. And it had kept Matt Stafford really in check. I thought that he was going to lean towards that, Tim, because of his defensive background. He's got two of those hats on. He's very analytics, very analytic driven, but he's also a defensive guy at heart. And I thought he would lean towards kicking and going, you know what? My defense has shown me today that they can get off the field. I'm going to trust him one more time. That was the only thing, as I was kind of weighing it yesterday, just sitting around watching it, that I thought they were going to lean towards the field goal.
I think I understand that, but I also think that was your opportunity to win the game. If you kick a field goal there, again, you're with the way the NFL is and the way kickers are now. I mean, it's 25. If you're getting the ball at the 30, it's 25 yards and you're in field goal range. That's one pass.
Yeah.
At this point, that's one chunk play. So if you kick the field goal there and you give up one chunk play, which is not unreasonable for Matthew Stafford and that offense to get one chunk play, they're in field goal range. And can you put another drive together with the way your offensive line is to get down the field to try and kick another field goal and actually win the game? Or are you looking at either losing or you walk out of there with a tie, which, okay, a tie is better than a loss. But I just feel like with the way those first handful of plays of overtime went, they were, it made sense in that moment to, it made sense to go for it. I felt if you're kicking there, I think you're asking for a different level of, obviously everyone's disappointed because the play call was terrible and the play didn't work. But if you kick there and then you give up the touchdown, you're looking back on it going, it was 4th and 1. Why the hell didn't we just go for it?
Curtis, I thought
and
maybe
in a 10-minute overtime, like
Yeah.
you may not even get that other possession anyway. Like so at that point, you're just kind of playing not to lose with the field goal instead of playing to win. And frankly, they needed to win yesterday.
Yeah. I think that you know what's interesting, you go back and I think to me, it's not so much the fourth down play. I think the 3rd and 1 is where you probably should have lined up big and heavy like you were going to run it. And then that's where you slip out and hit the pass. You know, it's kind of what the Rams did to you for the game winner. They kind of line up, you look like they're going to run, and bam, they hit that thing over the top. I think that 3rd and 1, they look back on it, maybe like we should have done something, show run, but now we're slipping out JSN for something, and he's been unguardable throughout the whole game. And I also think back, Curtis, if you go back and look at it, and it's easy, you slow it down frame by frame by frame. That 3rd and 1 play, I don't know what happened, but it's the one reason I really dislike shotgun when you need to get a yard. Because the running back has zero momentum. Zero. Because he's standing next to or right behind the quarterback, and there's no momentum taking him to the line of scrimmage. And I just think he's best when he's going downhill and going hard at times. And I would have liked to see them under center and just give it to him like that. But also, if you go back and look at it, for a split second, there is a hole there. And he hesitates for some reason. I don't know why he did. Maybe it was, I think maybe Verse was coming off the edge. But I thought for a split second, Curtis, it was there for them to get, especially on the 3rd down play.
Well, I think that's kind of the give and take of Ken Walker in some regards. So, like, because there are going to be times where he's able to make a cut to somewhere you aren't expecting and make a play out of something that isn't there. And then sometimes he's going to miss that chance, trying the exact same thing and ending up in a worse off situation. I'd have to go look at the play a little bit closer again to kind of get a better sense for it. But also, I mean, maybe that's why, one of the reasons you do go out of shotgun is to try to sell that you are in a passing situation there. It's all, I mean, we can second guess all of these little aspects of all the decision making.
I love second guessing.
Line block, man.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's just, you said it earlier. It's like, I mean, 90% of this team's problems are because they can't do anything up front. All right, I did this little exercise. We're going to walk through it together. I did this exercise with Jim, okay? We are, both of us, degenerate gamblers, all right? I can make a real argument that they will not be favored in the remaining games on their schedule. In none of them, okay? 49ers game, they're not going to be favored. They're going to come home against the Cardinals. I mean, the Rams were favored yesterday. I think the Cardinals are favored here at home. They go to the Jets. I mean, maybe it's a pick 'em, but maybe the Jets are favored by a point. Then you are at Arizona, won't be favored there. You got 2 straight games at home, Packers and Vikings. You'll be underdogs in both those games. Then you go to Chicago. That might be one where you possibly could be favored. And then you finish with the Rams, but you won't be favored on that one because you weren't favored yesterday. And then you look at it and you go, it's conceivable, Tim, that they lose every one of those games. I mean, honestly, think about it. The way that they're playing right now. And you're what do you go? You're 4-13.
I'm glad we've reached week 9 and you're this fatalistic that you're just like they're going to go 4-13 and have a top 10 pick this year.
Well, you could. I'm just saying that is like once I thought that was no way. I mean, this team looked like a 9-8 team to me, maybe 10-7. But I just think that the way that schedule shakes out and the way these teams are playing better. Right? I mean, what's the most winnable games left on their schedule? At New York, at Chicago, and what makes that harder, right, Tim, is that both those games are on the road.
I think I'm still not sold on Arizona, so okay. I'll couch it with that. I think they'll probably be favored in the Arizona game. I think that's a game they should win. Again,
the one at home.
The one at home. Okay. I think they could end up favored in New York, depending on how much of a destructive phase Aaron Rodgers is in at that point. And yeah, Chicago, who knows where they're at right now, because they're reeling, and who knows what the day after Christmas will look like there. But yeah, I mean, you've kind of kicked away your window here of having a bunch of games that seemed winnable, that you're now, if you want to make something of this season beyond, hey, it's the first year transition and we're going to be happy with whatever the results are. If you really want to make something out of this season, you really have to come up with some wins here of games that you're, like you said, are not going to be favored. So I would not expect them to go win in San Francisco, but I do think they could beat Arizona here. I do think they could beat the Jets on the road. I do think they could win in Arizona. But those are with the deficiencies this team has, those are the furthest things from any sort of guarantee. So yeah, if you want to be super pessimistic right now, 4-13 sounds like a great season. And what would that be like? Losing 13 of your last 14 games. That's fantastic. But again, look at what happened 3 weeks ago when they went to Atlanta and kicked the crap out of the Falcons. Yeah. I mean, it's the Jekyll and Hyde nature of this team, and that was a game where their deficiencies were not highlighted because that was the weakness of their opponent. Mm-hmm. So if you have situations as the season progresses where they can hide those issues, specifically with the offensive line, specifically with the line of scrimmage, then yeah, they're going to be competitive and they're going to be in games and they're going to have a chance to win. But how many of those do they have left? That I don't know.
Well, I mean, Curtis, do you think they can go? I mean, they can obviously, but the realistic record of 6-2 to get to 10 wins. I mean, it's going to take 10 wins to get in.
It's tough to say. You want me to paint a picture for it? Abe Lucas comes back, plays better. They actually have a right tackle that can play. They find a fix at right guard. And now all of a sudden, the ceiling that they've shown they're capable of is able to be reached a little bit more often because they can actually protect their quarterback and create some running lanes on the ground. That would be the way you kind of start to do it, because the defense did make its strides. I think they cleaned up some things, and I think you see some progress. I think Kobe Bryant's been phenomenal.
Oh, he's been
at
great.
Safety the last couple of weeks.
Great.
Ernest Jones has kind of helped their linebacker play for sure, and him coming in for 2 games. The defensive line being healthier has got that back to being a little bit more reliable. That's the way you would do it to start kind of getting on a run. But then we saw what happened with George Fant. He lasted all of about 15 plays yesterday when he came back from his knee injury. So, expecting that Abe Lucas can stay on the field and play at a high level is still a pretty high ask at this point. But if he does, is there a path there? Sure, but it's going to take some stuff to really kind of go in their favor here for them to start finding that ability to hit the ceiling of their play often enough to kind of go on that run. Because I still think they have plenty of talent to do it on the roster, but keep coming back to that. Offensive line is such a limiting factor. Everything they want to do, that it's just really putting them behind the 8 ball every week.
Tim, I got another gambling question for you.
Let's go. I'm all in for these.
And Curtis hates these hypothetical scenarios. All right, so hey, just entertain me for a second, Curtis. Let's say they lose Niners, Cardinals, and the Jets. They lose their next 3. At what point do you just say, maybe we give Sam Howell a shot? Do you think we ever get to the point of the season where we are having a legitimate discussion that Sam Howell may start a game in the NFL for this team this year?
Outside of injury, and this is just because of your stupid bet with Jim.
Yeah, this is exactly what it is.
If outside of injury, I do not think we will get to a point where there is a justification for starting Sam Howell above Geno Smith. I don't think. I think Sam Howell would be in an avalanche of just confusion, pressure, not knowing what the hell to do, trying to play behind this offensive line right now. And so short of Geno getting hurt because whatever reason. I do not think you will get to a point where it will be feasible for them to put Sam Howell in there at quarterback.
Curtis, you concur with that?
Yeah, and here's why. Sam Howell was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL last year. We see what this offensive line is. Geno Smith is still completing 68% of passes and is leading the league in passing from a yardage standpoint. Sam Howell ain't doing that. I'm sorry, he's not. Not with the offensive line that they have right now. So, no, they're not making any change at quarterback, barring injury. It's not happening. Geno Smith had his worst game yesterday because of the turnovers. We know that. And they still almost won that game in overtime because he threw for 330 and made Jackson Smith. Smith and Jigba should have gone for almost 250 if the 2 holding penalties hadn't held up against Mike Jarrell there. He had a phenomenal day. And again, tried to say it all year. Geno Smith is not the problem with this football team. He hurt them yesterday, but Sam Howell is not better than Geno Smith. I'm sorry, he's not. I saw him all throughout training camp, all throughout the offseason. There's a massive delta there.
I mean, Joel does have a point in our chat. He has 18 starts in the NFL playing behind a terrible offensive line. He does have experience, Curtis. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to go 4-13, sure, run it out there.
Well, I want to make sure I'm going to collect my $250 that
I think
Sam
your bet's
Howell.
Fine, Puck.
Yeah. Well, that's all I wanted you to tell me, that my bet was okay. Are you, Curtis? Let me stick with you. Are you surprised? I know I am, because I had built up Mike Macdonald as this real detail-oriented, hyper-focused stickler of the rules, but everything. We're not going to have some of these procedure penalties and some sloppiness that we did see under Pete Carroll, right? In his tenure, even when they were winning a bunch of games. To me, it has been more, maybe I'm more focused on it this year for some reason than in the past, but I'm really surprised just how sloppy at times they are, Curtis, and undisciplined. I mean, they lead the league in penalties. They had 12 yesterday for 95. They're second in the league in offensive holding. Comes back to the offensive line. They've got the third most delay of games in the NFL. They have 17 false starts, which leads the league. They average about 8.3 penalties a game. That leads the league. You surprised just how sloppy they are with this new staff?
Well, not when you kind of detail out the specific penalties and where they're coming from. Where are they coming from? The offensive line. Oh, we've been talking about that for the last 30 minutes. So, no, I mean, look.
But it's on the Curtis. It's also, though, delay of games and being in the wrong position. There's guys running on the field late. I mean, there is that as well, though.
Yeah, there is some of that for sure. And I mentioned the fact that they were undisciplined in my story last night about the game and everything. No. That's where it comes down to. I mean, they've had the sloppy penalties at times. Mike Macdonald told us today, and I mean, you're going to have some penalties. It's just kind of the nature of playing football. You're going to have some of those, and you have to accept some of that. But the procedure penalties are ones that you need to be cleaner on. The delay of games, you might have one happen every once in a while, but you can't let that be a regular occurrence. And I mean, I know for a fact he's had to call timeout a few times to save some of those penalties as well, on top of what the ones they have taken. So yeah, I mean, they have their limiting issues on this roster, and the penalties have certainly been a problem for them as well. And the fact that most of them are coming on the offensive line again does not surprise me because of the unit that we've been talking about. But sometimes a coaching change doesn't solve all the problems with the team. And I think you're seeing that a little bit now, too.
Yeah. All right, Tim, give us, before we wrap up, they'll have the bye, then they'll be taking on the 49ers in a couple of weeks. Tim, where do we stand health-wise? Is it your expectation that we see both Abe Lucas and DK Metcalf back for the Niners game?
So, McDonald talked this morning already. It sounds like Abe Lucas probably has a chance of being out there, which is incredibly good news. Yeah. Considering the situation at right tackle. I don't know if you can necessarily expect him to go a full boat, kind of right away. Maybe it's a little bit of a rotation with, Gerald or whoever else at right tackle to start with. But just the idea that he has the potential of being back is pretty significant for them right now. DK, it sounded like he hedged a little bit related to DK's availability, but the idea of being, hopeful that he will be out there, against the Niners, I don't know. In no world do I see them going down to San Francisco and winning this game. So if DK is a kind of a 50-50 proposition, I don't know why you would run him out there and maybe not just make sure he's all the way back to play the following week against Arizona in a game that's probably more, important or meaningful at that point. But Abe definitely needs to get out there and get some reps and knock at least a little bit of the rust off if you want him to be able to be as big of a contributor as you're hoping he will be the last half of the season.
Okay. Well, we'll see where they go, and we'll just see what the season unfolds. I mean, I again, and Tim, you guys and Curtis, you both kind of touched on it. I do believe they are a few plays away from having just such a much different record. I mean, they are not that far off, even in that game yesterday. I mean, they just aren't. And I go back to the Bills game. Even though the Bills game looked massively different, a few plays they make in the first half, and all of a sudden you've got a different football game. So I don't think it's all that bad, but it is that razor edge, thin line that you have in the NFL, and it's just they're not making enough plays in order to get on the other side of the column there on the win-loss stuff. And again, Curtis, you're right. I mean, it's all of it. It all ends with that offensive line play. All right, thank you, boys. Before you go, tell everybody where you can find your work. Tim, where can they find all your stuff at?
Go to seattletimes.com, subscribe, help pay my salary. That'd be great. That's all I got. That's my pitch entirely.
It's a great pitch, by the way. Go get yourself a subscription to the Seattle Times, seattletimes.com. Curtis?
X13seattle.com sports page. I have most of my stuff written up there. And obviously you can follow me on Twitter because it's not the other thing, at Curtis_Crabtree.
Yeah, there you go. Does anyone use Threads? Because you know what, I may need to get off Twitter and go to Threads. But at Threads, I go there and it doesn't really look good.
I've got
to be at.
Yeah, I've got a Threads account, but I never use it. So.
Yeah, it's not quite there yet. All right, guys. Appreciate it. There they are. Curtis Crabtree, Tim Booth. We'll talk to you guys next week. Tim Booth, Seattle Times. Curtis Crabtree there of Fox 13. And again, all brought to you by the Ground Puck Podcast. Brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by two diehard Huskies, Manny and Roger. They've been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years. Makers of Manny's Pale Ale, Bodhisattva, and a host of their favorite beers. Tap room is open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Visit them at georgetownbeer.com. You can find that episode up on YouTube, by the way, also up on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts, of course, at pucksports.com.